I'm going to tell you this like it really happened, the way it felt in the air that night. Like you could hear the candles breathing and the castle holding its secrets, the whisper behind the tapestry. The night smelled like rain on old stone, the kind that sinks into a castle and never fully leaves. In the great hall of Nocturne Keep, candlelight swayed gently, stretching long shadows across painted ceilings where angels and storms had been frozen for hundreds of years. Everything looked grand and cold at once, gold trim, dark velvet, silver goblets that never warmed. King Lucien walked alone, silent as a thought. He didn't need guards. He didn't need noise. The whole kingdom already listened for him, even when he wasn't speaking. That was the strange burden of a vampire king who ruled with calm instead of cruelty. Everyone expected a monster, so they watched him closely for proof. Lucien moved past tall windows where the moon hung low, like it had come closer to check on him. He wore a deep black coat with a small, plain clasp at the collar. No jeweled crown tonight, no display. Anyone who looked carefully would notice the real truth. He dressed like a man trying not to be noticed in his own home. Because being noticed meant being judged. And Lucien had been judged for centuries. He paused beside a marble statue of a kneeling knight. Someone long ago had chipped the knight's face as if to punish it for loyalty. Lucien's fingers hovered near the damage, then pulled away. He didn't touch it. He rarely touched anything broken anymore. A soft sound floated down the corridor. Not footsteps, not a door. A laugh. It was small and bright, so human it didn't belong in these heavy halls. It carried something dangerous in it, not because it was loud, but because it was alive. Lucien stopped walking. For a moment, his expression didn't change, yet the air around him seemed to tighten, as if the castle itself leaned closer to listen. No one laughed freely in Nocturne Keep. Not since the last rebellion. Not since the last time Lucien's kindness had been mistaken for weakness, and people had paid the price for trusting the wrong hearts. He had learned to keep peace by being distant, by being the kind of ruler nobody could get close enough to betray. And yet, that laugh again. Lucien followed it. The corridor narrowed into an older wing, where the tapestries were faded and the torches burned lower. Here the walls smelled faintly of cedar and dust, and the floorboards had a quiet creak that even he couldn't silence. It was the part of the castle that servants used when they didn't want to be seen. Shortcuts, side routes, hidden doors. Lucien knew them all. He had built some himself, centuries ago, before he became a king and after he had stopped being simply a man. Another sound, hushed talking now. A woman's voice, careful and warm, like someone trying not to disturb a sleeping child. Then a man's voice, younger, nervous, trying to be brave. They were behind the tapestry at the end of the hall, the one stitched with a midnight forest and silver deer. Lucien stopped just before it. He listened without meaning to. It wasn't that he enjoyed secrets. It was that secrets had hunted him all his life. "I shouldn't be here," the young man whispered. "You shouldn't," the woman replied. "But you were shivering outside like a lost puppy, and I'm not heartless." There was a soft rustle, like fabric being adjusted. Then, something that didn't belong in a castle that feared its own ruler, gentleness. Lucien's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in something older, something like memory. Then he heard her name. "Esme," the young man said, almost pleading. "If the king finds out—" "Don't say his name like that," she interrupted. "Like he's a storm that only hurts people. You don't know him." Lucien's breath didn't change, but something in his chest did. Esme. Of course it was Esme. She had arrived at Nocturne Keep 6 months ago, a maid with hands too steady for someone her age. She didn't bow too low, didn't chatter, didn't stare at his fangs like they were a storybook curse. She worked quietly, but she had a strange habit that Lucien noticed more than he wanted to admit. She fixed small things. A torn curtain seam, a broken latch, a cracked teacup glued carefully together. Once, he'd seen her kneel in the courtyard to lift a wounded sparrow into her apron, whispering nonsense to it like it could understand. The next day, the bird had flown away. No one else in the castle did that. People here survived by pretending not to care. Lucien had told himself Esme was only a servant, a warm presence in a cold place, nothing more. Now she was meeting a man in a hidden corridor, talking in whispers behind a tapestry, defending Lucien like he was something worth defending. And that, strangely, was what made danger bloom in the king's mind. Because if Esme believed in him, she could be used against him. The young man spoke again, voice trembling. "They said you're kind. They said you bring bread out to the village children when the winter carts don't come. That you." Esme cut him off softly. "Keep your voice down. Walls here have ears." Lucien's gaze drifted to the tapestry. He could imagine her face without seeing it. Calm eyes, serious mouth that sometimes fought a smile, a person who carried quiet courage like a lantern under her ribs. "Look," Esme continued, "I can't help you if you keep wandering into places you don't belong. If you need work, I'll speak to the steward. If you need food," her voice lowered, "I'll bring it, but don't come here again." The boy exhaled shakily. "You're risking your life." Esme let out a small snort, almost a laugh. "I make beds and scrub floors. Everything about my job is risking my life if I do it wrong." That line should have been funny. It was funny. Lucien felt the edge of a smile try to form, an unfamiliar, almost painful sensation, like a muscle he hadn't used in centuries. Then the smile disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by the heavy reality of what he was hearing. A secret meeting, a human boy, supplies, quiet talk of kindness and bread and winter. There were only two possibilities. Either Esme was helping someone desperate, or Esme was part of something much darker, something that looked like innocence until it was. Lucien's mind flashed to old betrayals, trusted advisors, smiling diplomats, servants who slipped poison into goblets meant for a guest. He didn't drink human blood the way cruel legends claimed. He lived on a lawful system of donated crimson from the royal infirmary, a pact created to protect both humans and vampires under his rule. Still, rumor didn't care about truth, and rebellion didn't care about kindness. He reached for the tapestry. His fingers touched the thick embroidered thread, cold and rough. On the other side, the voices stopped instantly, like animals sensing a predator. Silence flooded the corridor. Then a whisper, barely audible. "Esme, someone's there." Lucien pulled the tapestry aside. Candlelight fell into the hidden space behind it, revealing a narrow service alcove and a small door that led down into the lower passages. The young man froze, maybe 19, with wind-burned cheeks and a cap clutched nervously in his hands. His eyes were wide, terrified, fixed on Lucien as if seeing a nightmare step out of the dark. And Esme stood between them, not hiding behind the boy, not stepping away. Between them. Her hands were empty. Her apron had flour dust on it, like she'd come straight from the kitchens. A loose strand of hair had slipped from her bun, curling against her cheek. Her eyes met Lucien's with a steady honesty that struck him harder than fear ever could. For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. The castle seemed to hold its breath. Lucien looked at the boy, then back at Esme. He expected to feel anger. He expected to feel betrayal. Instead, what rose in him was something far more dangerous. Worry. "Esme," Lucien said quietly. His voice carried no threat, but it filled the space like a deep bell. The boy flinched. Esme didn't. "My king," she replied, and her tone was respectful, yet there was something else in it, too. A softness that didn't belong in royal halls, a bravery that didn't ask permission. Lucien's eyes moved to the boy again. Who is he? The boy opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His hands shook so badly his cap nearly fell. Esme lifted her chin. He's hungry, she said simply. One word, one truth. Hungry. Lucien had heard that word shouted in riots, whispered by widows, prayed over empty bowls. It wasn't just about food. It was about the fear that nobody would care if you disappeared. Lucien's jaw tightened. He didn't like being reminded that his kingdom still had cracks in it, cracks where children could slip through. Hungry, Lucien repeated, tasting the word like a test. And you brought him into my castle. I didn't bring him, Esme said. He came. I found him shaking by the servants' gate. Lucien's gaze sharpened. And you didn't alert the guards. If I had, Esme replied, voice low but unwavering, they would have treated him like a threat before they treated him like a person. The young man swallowed hard, eyes darting between them. Lucien could smell fear rolling off him like sweat. Not guilt, fear. Esme's shoulders were tense, but her feet stayed planted. Like she had decided something long before this moment. Like she had looked at the kind of world she lived in and chosen not to become cold just because the castle was. Lucien's silence stretched. The air felt heavier, as if the corridor had dropped deeper underground. At last, Lucien spoke, still calm. Do you know what people will say if they learn a maid has been hiding strangers in royal passageways? Esme's lips parted. For the first time, her confidence wavered, not because she feared punishment, but because she understood the truth behind his words. They would say she was plotting. They would say the king was weak. They would say kindness was a doorway for chaos. And if a rebellion rose again, it would not be Esme who paid first. It would be everyone. Esme's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Then let them say it, she whispered. Or prove them wrong, show them the truth. Lucien stared at her, and something old and locked inside him shifted, like a door he'd nailed shut long ago trembling on its hinges. He had ruled through restraint, through distance, through silence. He had tried to be fair without being close, merciful without being touched. But Esme wasn't asking him to be feared. She was asking him to be seen. The boy took a sudden step back toward the hidden door, panic taking over. I should go. Esme reached out to stop him, but Lucien moved faster, not with violence, not with a strike, but with one swift step that blocked the doorway completely. His shadow covered the lower stairs. The boy froze. Esme's breath caught. My king, please. Lucien's eyes flicked to her face. For a moment, his expression softened, so faintly it could have been imagined. Then he turned back to the boy. You will not leave, Lucien said. The words were quiet, but they landed like iron. Esme's throat tightened. The boy's eyes filled with terror. Even the candles seemed to dim. Lucien held up one hand, not a threat, a command for stillness. Because if you came here hungry, he continued, voice controlled, someone sent you, or someone failed you, and I intend to find out which. Esme's gaze snapped to him, confusion and fear mixing with something like hope. You intend to help. Lucien didn't answer her question. Not yet. He looked down the stairwell behind the hidden door, where a draft of colder air rose from the lower passages. His senses caught something else now beneath the dust and stone. A scent that didn't belong. Not the boy, not Esme. Something sharp, metallic, familiar in the worst way. A message had been left in his own castle, close enough to touch. Lucien's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, real alarm, quiet, controlled but unmistakable, moved across his face. He whispered almost to himself, No. Esme followed his gaze into the darkness. What is it? Lucien didn't look away from the stairwell as he answered, his voice suddenly lower, heavier. Someone has already been here, he said, and they weren't looking for food. Esme's hand flew to her mouth as a faint sound drifted up from below, a slow, deliberate knock, like a signal. One knock. Pause. Two knocks. Then silence. Lucien's posture changed, protective without meaning to be. He shifted slightly, placing himself in front of Esme, shielding her with the simple angle of his body, as if instinct had chosen before his pride could argue. Esme stared at his back, realizing in one shocked breath that the vampire king everyone feared was standing between her and the dark. And from the stairwell, a voice rose, smooth and soft, carrying a smile you could hear. "Your Majesty," it called, "we need to talk about your maid." Lucien's eyes hardened. Esme's knees went weak, because she recognized that voice. And she had never told anyone she knew it.